What's up, guys? Joinger1, aka Chicago Joey here. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of my podcast series, which I will be calling The Poker Life, where I will be talking with different poker people outside of the PLO world and will be basically talking all things related to poker. Now, as of right now, my older podcasts haven't been on iTunes yet, but I've taken the steps today to get those and this series of podcast on iTunes. So you will be able to go ahead and download that shortly. And when that's ready, I will have the link in the description. And this particular podcast is going to be in audio form only, but for future episodes of this, I will probably be including some video, whether on my end or my end and the guest end as well. And I'll actually have episode 2 up in a couple days as well if you're listening to this right when I put it up, and that will be in the video form. The first guest I have on is someone I was extremely excited to talk about. His name is Bart Hanson. He's been doing podcast for about 8 years. I used to listen to his podcast every single week when they came out. I loved it. I felt like I got to learn a lot about how to play No Limit, back when I was really into No Limit. And I think there's going to be a lot of listeners out there to my podcast who might not have much of an idea who he is. And yeah, I think this would be a good chance for you to learn a little bit more about him. You can hear where we talk about the differences between live and online PLO, his podcasting experiences. We even, I like to talk about women. We briefly talk about meeting women in poker. I hope you guys enjoy the first episode. And be sure to check out the rest of my podcasts, which include my High Stakes PLO podcast series and also my podcast series that me and WCG Ryder, aka Doug Polk, do. Those will be on my YouTube channel at Joinger1, and you can also get future episodes by subscribing to my channel or following me on Twitter at Joinger1. So enjoy. All right, Bart Hanson, thank you for joining me as my first guest on outside of PLO on my podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Now, I am very, very excited that you're my first guest because you were actually your podcast, your No Limit podcast that you've been doing for, how long have you been doing them for now?
Well, yeah, since the beginning of 2008. So what is that, 6.5 years, something like that?
So I started playing poker in 2008. And
Okay.
I remember I was living in Chicago, and I think I was playing 10-cent, 25-cent full ring. And when I'd go walk to get food, I'd always listen to podcasts, and I'd always listen to every new episode of your podcast. And I felt like it was my favorite podcast that I listened to for probably like 3 years when I moved to California. When I started doing okay at poker, I still listen to it all the time because I just felt like it just helped me learn, and I enjoyed the guests and all that type of stuff. And about a year ago, I was thinking, why doesn't something like this exist for PLO? And then I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to do the podcast myself because there needs to be something like a cash plays, for PLO people because I think they'd be interested in it, but it just doesn't exist. So I'm super happy that you could join me here, and we can have the listeners that listen to my podcast get to know a bit about you and your training site, your live poker training site, and maybe check out your podcast at some point in time.
Great. Well, I mean, the thing about podcasts is that when I did my first podcast back for Poker Road way, way, way back when, I wasn't paid for it, but I had hosted their main show, and I talked to the 2+2 PokerCast guys about this. I was in San Jose a few weeks ago, and the thing about podcasts is the trick is you actually have to do them on a regular schedule. People will just say, "Oh, I'm going to do it," and then. Not that it's a ton of work, but they just don't, they say, oh, I'm going to do a weekly podcast, and then they miss a week or here or two, and then that's it. Forget about it. Like people never really take it seriously on a serious schedule. I mean, that's 95% of the thing is people just don't keep it on a serious schedule. And I mean, in reality, most people aren't making money off of podcasts in any facet. I've had the opportunity to make a good living off of it because of a live poker training niche. PLO is kind of an interesting thing just because there just doesn't seem to be, at least for me. I mean, I do have a guy that actually does PLO videos for my site, Crush Life Poker, and he does a video every other week. And I see the matrix and stuff of the people that watch my videos and stuff, and it was it kind of is what I expected it to be. There just aren't that many people interested in PLO
Mm-hmm.
now, and also too, like, maybe there are a lot of recreational players that are playing at the higher levels, but those guys aren't the ones that are going necessarily for training. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I'll throw out a number. I would say maybe there might be 20 times the player pool that are playing like a level of 2.5 no limit as would play like 2.5 PLO. It's just
Sure.
sheer numbers. And I don't really see it growing either. I mean, there's always been this discussion of, oh, is PLO going to be the next game? And I will point to 2+2 legend Lyman, who's also a coach on my site, who does a weekly podcast. And he did a podcast with me back when I worked for a different company, and he said that PLO is never really going to be the game of the future because, recreational players, they hate two things. Two of the things that they hate the most are bad beats and tough decisions, and that's all what PLO is, right? Bad beats and tough decisions.
It's many bad beats and
And it's just, and he uses the term through tickets, like, you can see a guy in No Limit playing 80 big blind stack, an old guy drinking coffee, and he just waits around for aces or kings, and he's just kind of learned that if you play super tight, there are certain hands on certain boards that he is just going to go with no matter what. And it's not really all that incorrect, but that's obviously not the case in PLO, and that's why those guys get eaten alive, and that's why it's just not really a recreational player's game. And I think, at least this is from my perspective, I really only see kind of huge degenerates play it at the highest levels, like huge gambling degenerates, like rich guys. And then at the mid stakes levels, a lot of the soft spots are the guys that are transitioning from No Limit.
so
You know
I
what I
think
mean?
you definitely have. So I mean, I approach my thinking and my thoughts at PLO from an online player standpoint because I've only played a bit of live poker, live PLO rather, and you're basically coming from a live American
Yeah,
PLO
probably,
standpoint
yeah.
too, for
Right.
sure. So I think when I view an audience type of thing for PLO, I mean, I think I'm actually lucky that I can even get any audience for PLO because I think you're right in that they're really, when you think about no limited PLO, the difference in people playing one or interested in one is just so much. It's so much different, and that's kind of why that's one of the reasons why I want to do this the PLO podcast as well was that I would hope that there might be some people that I can take from that no limit world and just get them maybe a bit more interested in PLO because I think it's people have heard of the game but they're scared to try it. They can't try it. In a live poker setting like you said, there really isn't the amount of no limit games you can play is just so much more vast than the amount of PLO games you can play. So people just play no limit. They don't really try anything new. And I guess my hope with doing those podcasts is that maybe I can get 10, 15, 20 people to just give it a try and maybe it sticks with them and then they start playing PLO or maybe they turn from a recreational player into someone that becomes seriously interested in playing the game. So that was kind of my initial reason why I wanted to even do that podcast in general at all. So
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a way more complex game than Hold'em. I will say, however, some people might disagree with me that from what I've seen, the people that transition from No Limit to PLO, they were the guys that weren't maybe I mean, maybe they were professionals, maybe they were winning No Limit players, but maybe they weren't the best No Limit players. I've never seen a super good guy, a super great No Limit player who's consistently beating up the games. And again, I come from a live background, who's consistently beating up the games in his player pool at a top level, transition to PLO. I see guys who are maybe, decent No Limit players, and they're like, I'm going to give PLO a shot to see if I can win more money, and that happens. So for me, I have played hundreds of hours in live PLO, and I'm by nowhere near an expert. I think I'm probably now a moderate winner. It took me a learning curve, but I would never give the game up or say I'm going to exclusively play PLO. over No Limit because the live No Limit games in LA, even though the rake is still really, really high, like at places like Commerce, they're still so good, like at the 5-10 level. 10-20 can be a little bit spotty that it's just, there's no reason. I mean, No Limit is it's a game with, again, far less short-term variance than PLO. And, I can go in there and play 5-10 No Limit at Commerce and just almost see very, very few good players. There'll be enough tables where you can migrate away from a table that's ever where there's anybody there that's ever giving you any type of grief. And there's a great amount of recreational players that are playing 5-10 No Limit still in LA that I never really have to worry about even saying like, oh, I want to try and, take this time to play live 10-20 PLO. It's just, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my situation.
So you touched on a couple points there that I can expand on. One, the type of player you named that transitioned from No Limit to PLO, that's exactly what I was when I actually transitioned from No Limit. I was playing online and I was winning at small stakes, mid stakes, but I wasn't, one of the best players, and I didn't think I'd probably would ever get that point at No Limit. And I started playing PLO, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to play PLO was I wanted to see what I could do in that. And I think at the mid stakes levels, I know a lot of the guys that have had long term success. They used to be No Limit players on some level, not the high stakes. Most of them were mid stakes players that did transition over. But like you said, the people that are really successful in No Limit, and a lot of my friends that still live in America, they just like you, they don't see there's no reason to really play. There's no real reason to start learning PLO just because you're playing this game you've been playing for 7, 8, 9 years. Your variance is very minimal. Like why you know what I mean? Like why mess up like a winning formula kind of thing. So I think that your thought process is actually really accurate with a lot of my friends who still play No Limit to this day, and they just don't they don't feel like they need to get into No Limit.
Yeah, and obviously, maybe if you were playing, I don't know, maybe back in 2009, 2010, I don't know exactly how the the history of the way that the games toughened up online, but whenever that period of time when maybe some of like the mid stakes No Limit online games like really got tough, maybe some people moved over to PLO, like the 1-2 games and up in No Limit, like 1-2, 2-4, where they got really tough. Then people moved over to PLO too, something like that. But in a live setting, yeah, it's just the other thing too about live PLO, and again, me coming from a live setting, is that even if you are a really good PLO player, where you can make 1.5x or however many more times per hour, right, your win rate versus the same level in No Limit.
Mm-hmm.
I find that full ring live PLO runs so slow, you're almost seeing like 1.5x less hands per hour. So it's just like, okay, you know what I mean? It's a wash.
This is the reason why I don't play live PLO. Even thinking about playing live PLO just makes me very sad and feel kind of miserable in a way. But I mean, obviously, I could still understand why there are people playing it, and some people just really enjoy the live setting as compared to online. Actually, I want to know, why did you start doing podcast a long time ago? Like, what made you get into it? Why did you want to help people get better at poker?
Well, it wasn't so Joe Seabach did this site called Poker Road that was
I used to love that site a lot.
Yeah, Barry Greenstein and Barry Greenstein's stepson, and coming out at the end of 2007, he had done a show with Scott Huff called With Card Player. Like they had done a podcast, and Joe Stapleton was in there too. And then they did a podcast with Full Tilt, and it was kind of the three of them and Gavin Smith. And then Joe just decided to kind of do his own poker media site. And at that time in 2007, I had made a final table on ESPN, had a really successful World Series. They had known me from Live at the Bike. Live at the Bike stopped in the beginning of 2007. So he approached me to host his main show, and I did that for several months. It wasn't really that didn't really work out that well because they were looking more for kind of fluffy comedy, and I was ended up being a little bit more serious. So
Yeah, you're definitely more of the, like when you speak, your voice is more, like educate. It's like an educational voice sort of thing, if that makes some sense. Like it's where as other people, like the people I think that ended up doing that podcast were more goofy and kind of,
yeah.
like
So it just ended up that when I stopped doing that show, I said, well, can I just do this? There were a couple of other shows that were on that site. And I was like, well, let me just try to do, I'll just try to do like this weekly strategy show. And that's kind of how it started back in, I think, February of 2008. And then it got really pop. By the way, all those interviews are actually on my site, crushlightpoker.com. They're actually, if you go to the bottom of the page, they're under archive content.
are those for
And
free? Are those for free on
yeah,
your website?
yeah, those are for free. You just go to the bottom of the page and click on archive content. The funny thing about those sites is like, or excuse me, that particular year on what was called Cash Plays is that I got some like insane interviews. I mean, it wasn't. I
You
mean,
did some really good interviews. Definitely really good.
the podcast kind of evolved where it became way more strategy and training based, especially when I migrated over to Deuces Cracked from Poker Road. But at that time, I mean, I remember doing one-on-one interviews about strategy with Brian Townsend, Tom Dwan, Phil Galfon, Barry Greenstein, like Leatherass, A.E. Jones, stuff that these guys don't give, no, or nobody knows, nobody does strategy interviews really. You know what I mean? It's just
For
like,
sure.
or these
Yeah.
guys. So it's quite interesting.
So how did you get those guests at that time? Was it just a matter of you asking them and them enjoying the work you were doing? Is it kind of something where you got one or two guests and then from that point on more guests were more,
I don't know.
interested
I
in
mean,
coming on?
the first guy that I got, I was at Foxwoods and there was this guy Simoleus, which was kind of a friend of friend, and he was kind of the first guy that I did a strategy interview with. And he was a longtime winner on PokerStars, going by the name Punkity, and he did an amazing interview. That was back in April of 2008.
Yep.
He's actually, I don't know if he still coaches for Blue Fire now or what, but
He was a very legendary online player for sure.
Yeah, that's a great one back from April of 2008. So that was kind of the first one. And then Brian Townsend had, when he was involved in Card Runners in 2007, they wanted to start a this was before I had anything to do with Poker Road, a few months before. So this was in the summer of 2007. They wanted to do a podcast. So they put it out there in 2007 that they wanted to do a podcast and they were looking for a host. And I contacted them. And I live in LA, he lives in Santa Barbara. I said, I can come up and meet with him. So he said, okay. So we went up and met and we had lunch. And that project ended up getting shelved. Like they didn't go through with it at that time. Mm-hmm. But then in April of 2008, I contacted him and said, hey, listen, will you come on? I'm doing the show for Barry and Joe. Can I just drive up and interview you? And he was like, yeah, sure. I didn't even know what he was going to say. Because, he was at his height. The
height of his epic run online.
Yeah, with Card Runners and, all that stuff. And he was like, yeah, sure. So, we went up there and did a 2-part thing. And then, I was just around at the World Series and, people, I don't know if it was the Poker Road name or whatever, but I was able to get, quite a few interviews. I interviewed Howard Lederer when I was I did the World Series of Poker Europe commentary that year in 2008, and I remember interviewing him in his hotel in London. That was interesting, too.
That must have been really interesting.
Well, of course. I mean, that was before everything,
yeah,
went down. But, yeah, definitely. I got to interview, I guess that was the next year. I interviewed Dan Harrington. I guess that was the next year. Sometimes I've done...
Yeah, I was gonna say you've been doing this for so long now. Do you feel like what still motivates you to do podcasts now? Like it's been so long. I would think eventually it would sort of burn out. But you also are, with your website, crushlivepoker.com, which is a live poker trading site. You have some incentive to keep doing these podcasts, which is, I guess, one of the big reasons why you might still want to do them.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, people don't, it's I try to kind of stay away from the people trying to egg me on sometimes on Twitter or, I'm a 2+2 lurker and stuff where I read threads, but I tend not to post to them because I just don't want to get involved. But I
Yeah.
mean, Crush Light Poker has become a serious business for me. I have a lot of subscribers. I don't have much overhead, and it's basically just me. I mean, I pay my coaches, um, for content, but I mean, I am absolutely making more money than I ever have playing poker, through this. I mean, I've got over 1,150 subscribers. So, it's a real business. I mean, I've played poker for like 8 or 9 years. And it's always going to be good to diversify. I love it because now, whatever, I play poker 20, 25 hours a week. I love it because I only pretty much will play 510 now because I need the content. Like not only do I not have to deal with first of all, I don't have to play poker for money, right? I don't have to deal with the variance of 1020, and 510 is a perfect sweet spot where it gets me relevant content from my site too. It's so easy. I don't really have to worry about game selecting. Commerce is such an interesting thing because the big game is separated from the small game, like by geography.
Hmm.
Like you have to walk back and forth. So if you're not really, really diligent about game selecting at 1020, and 1020 is now the biggest game, they rarely ever run larger no limit games, you can absolutely find yourself in bad games, if you're not walking back and forth. And it's annoying to walk back and forth, but you never find yourself in a bad game at 510. I mean, I know it's 510, it's a 1,500 cap, but I just find it so easy. Like I said, most of the strategy that I'm giving is very targeted towards people that are 1-2 and 2-5 players that are, maybe they're break even players or slight losing players. They're mostly recreational players. They want to know how to, learn how to win even slightly or become better players. I mean, I've certainly had players come through the, kind of the system and the site and have gone on to high stakes and stuff like that. The thing that I don't quite understand and I kind of dismiss is there seems to be a lot of bitter people, bitter guys that I've played with for a while, like at 1020, and I don't know if it's jealousy or just bitterness that they're kind of angry at me, not even necessarily for the training, but they're angry that I teach an exploitable style of no limit because they don't think it's fundamentally GTO correct. And I'm like, first of all, why do you even care? You don't even see these guys at your level. And if you do see them and they're coming from my quote unquote school of poker, then you can exploit them. And when you used to play 2-5, you know that playing GTO is not the way that you're supposed to play because the people that you're winning money from, the recreational players, aren't playing that way. Of course, you're supposed to play an exploitable style because that's the way that you're supposed to win the most. I mean, that's the way you're going to win the most money, usually in live poker.
So that's the kind of so you've been getting. I was going to ask you about that. Have you gotten any backlash from doing these training sites? But I think I didn't really anticipate that would be something that you've gotten where it's
It's
people.
not, yeah, it's not backlash from, this is my take on it. It's not necessarily backlash that I'm doing training. It's backlash, I think, from players that maybe have played with me for a while that play 1020 that think that they are better than me and are angry that I make money from poker training and that they don't. That's what it is.
I can definitely understand why those people would. I can. Yeah.
And it's not even like forget about who's better or who's not better. It even let's say that this guy who's mad about that is infinitely better than me. Okay?
Hmm.
Just give him that. Does that mean that he could coach people that are trying to that are having trouble beating 2-5 live no limit better than I do? Well, I've got a 7 or 8 year track record in it. I also have people that high stakes clients that have hired me in China that play the biggest games in Macau that have hired me to go over and teach them. The reason why I've been hired is because that's their skill level. Now they're playing the biggest games in the world, but their skill level and the way that that game plays is like a 2-5 no limit game. It's funny,
Hmm.
because it's all Chinese businessmen. So when you're playing in a game like that, would you rather try to find the coach that specializes at that level at teaching, who teaches the best approach at that level, or would you find a guy that's, the best coach at 50, 100, or 100, 200, no limit?
It's definitely it's very it's very interesting. Just I guess what you're doing, and then the interaction you must have with people, because it's it's something that no one else is doing. So there's no one else really teaching live poker. There's no one else really putting out this strategy content. And I would think that there's some people that also that are professional poker players who might feel that you're making their games harder.
Yeah,
And
but you know what? I think it's a totally different argument. I understand how people are upset about online training sites, and how those games absolutely, or how those training sites made the online games tougher, and absolutely did. I mean, when you look back at the way that training sites taught, it was more of, they taught the bad players how to break even against the good players, especially with bloating pots up and stuff, with the whole kind of three-bet madness back from like 2007 and 2008 when all that stuff was first introduced. But I mean, I'm not making the games tougher by teaching like a handful of 2-5
now,
recreational
see, I would
players.
actually definitely disagree with that, because I would think if there, so you have 1,100 subscribers, so if even if you assume that there are 100 of those people, and I would venture to guess the numbers more, that play for a living on some level, whether they make $1,000 a month or they make $20,000 a month playing, whatever stakes. But I mean, if you even make one player, say there's one player playing 510 at Commerce, if you help make that one player better, that's effectively that guy's playing every single day now. That's making the games that much harder. And then when you might make that two players, and I'm guessing everyone at Commerce, specifically Commerce, if we're talking about that instead of just nationwide or whatever, I'm guessing most everyone there knows about your site and probably watches it. I think they'd be dumb not to watch it. If you're a live poker player and there's this site that's helping you learn, you'd be dumb not to do it.
Yeah, but that's where you get to the difference, though, between playing live poker and being a mass multi-tabler online. If you were to take, and Lyman and I have had this discussion too about, I would say about a 50% chance that California online poker might come back by the end of next year. It's
Ooh.
proposed in this session. In this session in Sacramento, but California government is very, very upside down and backwards. It's like one of the most backward states in the whole country. So who knows what happens? But I mean, really, the key to having a successful kind of thriving site is almost to make it, I think, almost to make it run more similar to live poker than an online site where you can't have HUDs and you can't have mass multi-tabling. And where I'm going with this is that if you were to take those, say, one or two guys, like really good 510 players, and you were to multiply them across every single table in LA, every single 510 table in LA, let's say at any one time there are 10 510 games going in LA. And even if you only took two really good players and they got to play at every single table at the same time, yeah, the games would suck even from two, maybe three players, but it's live poker. And it's only one person, and it can only be at one table. And the player pool is so big, it doesn't really have that much of an impact as you think. See what I'm saying? The game is
I could definitely,
slow.
yeah, I definitely understand why it wouldn't in LA. I would guess it's probably it gets worse when you take a place like Chicago, for instance, where I live. There's one basic casino, which is the Horseshoe, and there's maybe one or two 510s that run every day. So if you take like two of those guys that might watch the content and helps get them better, and then they tell one other guy, and then there's three. I can imagine in that setting, it's definitely more. It's more of a game, makes the games harder. But in a setting where you're at, where there is an abundance of games to choose from, I definitely understand what you mean. It's less of an effect on that for sure.
Yeah, and and again, and what the stuff that I've, you know, the stuff that I put out is not, it's not rocket science. I mean, I can say it right here. I tell people, whether they come to me for private coaching or on the site, that, if you're playing 2-5 no limit and below, and to a certain extent 510 in reality, the game is 85 to 90% correctly value betting the best hand against your opponent's range, occasionally bluffing against your opponent's range, and that's the entire game. It's not, and I talk about bet folding and sometimes raise folding and stuff like that, and there are certain other things too, but I mean, that information is out there. And then it's just a lot of practice about, hand reading and things like that, but it's not anything that's revolutionary, and that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing. It's just live poker is its own animal because you're dealing with you're dealing with large amounts of money. For example, you look at 510, you're dealing with large amounts of money where you could win pots, and to a certain extent 10-20 if you're in the right games, where you can win pots that are several thousands of dollars large. Say like a pot of over $5,000, where you can literally be in a pot against someone where they have no poker training whatsoever, like literally nothing. Now, if you were to translate that onto online, I would go so far as to say that almost doesn't exist nowadays, or it hasn't existed for like the last 5 years.
I think a lot of the fishier, the top, I call them like top tier, middling tier players who are, I don't think, a lot of the guys I play with on a daily basis, I don't think they have any poker training for sure. But those guys, I mean, these guys are in like the middle of like pick a European country, and like they don't even know like training exists really. They're just like, oh, poker, I'm gonna play, and then they just come on to donate money every single day. So, but even those guys, I actually think may have heard of a site like Run It Once at this point in time.
Are you talking about like on a rogue online site, you mean?
I mean, just on like the VPNable sites, like there's Party Poker, 888 Poker, On Game, iPoker, the non-full tilt, non-Poker Star sites that a majority of people that still live in America play on, because it's pretty easy to play on those sites still.
Right, and then of course though you are talking about PLO though too, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about PLO for sure.
So, I mean...
and No Limit. Shit, yeah, probably everyone's got... I mean, you're right. You're right. Everyone's probably... All the No Limit players probably know what card.
I mean, when are you ever going to play an online No Limit pot of $5,000 or more where a guy is, opening Jack-9 suited and then calling your 3-bet when you 3-bet him with aces, and then check calling pot-sized bets when a jack flops basically for their entire stack. Do you see him? You know what I mean?
For sure. I mean, I'm sure that it still exists, but nowhere near as prevalent as obviously it was a couple years ago. You're right. I was thinking about it. What you said, I was thinking about towards PLO games, but to No Limit, yeah. I mean, even like a 10-cent, 25-cent table, I'm sure these days, like it's a bunch of people that have had training or read articles on a daily basis or something like that and want to get better, not just people giving money away. So how does it feel to know that there have been people that have been listening to you for years and years in their ears? They listen to you when they want to be entertained, when they might want to learn. How does that feel? Do you have any cool stories of interactions you've had with listeners over the years, as far as from that standpoint?
Well, I have one really cool story that just happened. I just went over to the East Coast, just on a trip because this will lead into a different story. I get a free trip from Caesars every year because I'm 7-star, which is the highest player level.
Does that mean you're a degenerate or degenerate gambler? Or
well,
the blackjack you were talking about before we got on that.
Yeah. I played a bunch of blackjack last year, but I'll talk about that in a second. And so I get a free trip. So I decided to go to Atlantic City because I'd heard that there was a really good 80-160 OE game, which is a split pot game at Borgata I wanted to check out. And I had a week free, so I did it, and that was good. And then I kind of made a little bit of a whirlwind trip. I went to Parks, and I went to Maryland Live, and I kind of announced that I was going to be out there. And we kind of had a subscriber dinner. And I met a guy who was a subscriber that kind of traded. I've been really interested in flying recently. So he took me up in his Lancier plane and we flew from Philly to Baltimore, but we flew up to Manhattan first and kind of like buzzed the Freedom Tower at like 500 feet in like this little 2 or 4-seater plane. And he kind of let me fly the plane, not in the Hudson Corridor, but like when we were going through.
He let you fly it around the big buildings in New York City.
and that was really cool. And so, yeah, I mean, I get to meet a lot of cool people, and that was really, really fun. Actually, I got my X-Plane simulator right here that I'm about to load in, and I have my parents bought me some flight lessons at Santa Monica Airport. So I get
You're, you're
the
really into flying
bug.
then, huh?
Well, I get the bug now, especially since this guy took me up. So that was really cool. His name was Rick, by the way. Thanks, Rick. And so we went to went to Maryland Live. Really liked Maryland Live. Thought Parks was pretty cool. And
Maryland Live. So there'll be probably some people listening that honestly don't even know what Commerce means. So Commerce is a casino in LA, and Maryland Live, what exactly is that? Is that a casino or a show, or what is that?
Maryland Live is a casino in North Baltimore. It's actually more like a mall, but it's a casino that opened up a couple of years ago, and it was really cool because it's interesting to see some of these places that have only kind of had no limit for the last couple of years because they had a 5-10 game there with like a 500 to 2K buy-in, which was amazingly soft. I actually played 10 and a quarter PLO there too, which was amazingly good too because one of these things again, not a ton of experience in that area, with the game. So yeah, it's definitely been not,
That's probably one of the things that probably still also, besides making a living from it, the motivation that you get still moving on is that you have these probably pretty cool interactions with listeners that have been, listening to you forever. Like I think that's something that appeals to me as far as when I do this. That's what I think about. Like there's probably a me version out there somewhere that listens to my podcast that started listening to him now that as long as I keep doing them, he'll be listening to them. And I just think about how I've like listened to your podcast for so long. You know what I mean? It's just I know the way I was feeling back then and how much I enjoyed them. So I try to put that sort of effort in when I do these things now because I know there's someone out there that, kind of enjoys it or appreciates the effort that you put into them.
I enjoy meeting people. I absolutely enjoy meeting people that come up to me and introduce themselves to me.
Does that happen pretty often then when you're out?
It does, especially now at the World Series and stuff. But yeah, the thing's gotten really, really big. There are certain, I mean, I hope this doesn't make anybody hesitate to ever introduce themselves to me, but I mean, they're just like any any sector of the population. There are certainly kind of some strange characters that I've met that almost are a little bit, they feel like,
They know you?
yeah, I feel like they know you, but it's like a little bit weird though. Like I can almost see it like when sometimes like celebrities on TV or whatever, people in movies say the same thing. Like it's just a little bit odd. Like this guy is like he's a little bit too close to you, like almost but maybe it's not intentional and maybe he's not a bad guy and he's not like that, but he just doesn't quite understand that he feels like he or she feels like he's a lot closer to you than he actually is just because he's had this kind of relationship that's gone on for the last 7 or 8 years with you listening to you on a weekly basis. And I don't know who this guy is. You know what I'm saying? So it's sometimes I can't even remember who I've had on the show before. I've done 300 shows. So it's, but I mean, most of the time that's not the case. Most of the time people are cool, but occasionally you run into that, but it's not really that big of a deal.
Common thing I like to talk about on my podcast is I talk about a lot of women, a lot of sometimes partying, raging, stuff like that. Have you met any women from doing your podcast? I mean, I'm not sure if you've been in a long-term relationship. If you have, of course, the answer to this question is no, but, how's that been so far for you?
Honestly, I mean, I wouldn't. I have absolutely no interest in ever dating any woman that has anything really to do with poker.
Really?
No, God. I mean, are you serious? I mean, there are so many women in the world. Why would you ever want to get involved with anyone that had anything to do with poker? I mean, first of all, I mean, that. I mean, I'm lucky to have some really, really close friends and. My friend David Tuckman, who works for the site, who does the World Series of Poker commentary over the summer. I'm actually going to Vegas for his bachelor party this weekend. Lyman, a couple of these guys. But I mean, most people that I meet in poker, which are mostly guys, they're they're not the best people in the world. There's a lot of degenerates,
Hmm.
anglers, scum, and I'm not even talking about just recreation players. I'm talking about the professionals too. Some of those guys are the worst. Um, so when you look at the cross section, how many women are there, especially that are playing like at the levels that I play, which is like 5'10" and above? Not many. As a subset, and of that, how many attractive women are there? Not many. I just what's the point? Why even dabble in that? It just doesn't even seem to make any sense to me at all.
Well, one of my like, I don't want to call this a dream, but one of my things I thought would be cool if I ever met a woman who was good at PLO that I could talk PLO with. And now I've never gotten into these specific stories, but I've met some women that might be considered poker celebrities, and I've also met some women that are just like random like 2-5 kind of players in casinos over the course of my poker career, and they do share that same quality that some of the men do. They are pretty degenerate and like not they're big anglers, which makes sense. Why that I never really thought about that though, but you're
I
right.
mean,
They are
you're
pretty.
answering your own question right there.
I
I don't know.
know. Well, you might have a lot of women listeners, and they might they might hit you up a lot. They might
I mean, when you
want to
look
get
at,
together.
obviously too, when you look at it logically, like those women are going to be coming from a standpoint where they're going to think that they're probably a lot more. They're going to think that their kind of status in life is a lot higher than it actually is because they're in a place where it's so male
Mm.
dominated that they're kind of put up even more on a pedestal. Like, for example, if you were to rate like a chick like in a poker room, like on average, right? Maybe she was like a 6 in the real world. Like in the poker room, she might be a 10 and she might be treated like a 10. It's so much worse. It's so much worse. It's like, so now you're dealing with a person that's probably not even that cool, and then somebody that thinks that she's so much better than she actually is because of the environment that she's in. It just doesn't seem like a.
Well, that actually reminds me of something I posted on in one of the threads in News Views Gossip. It was about some women, another thread about some women being sponsored now, and I posted in there like step one, be a woman; step two, be above a 6; step three, know someone in poker, know someone that plays poker, know anyone that plays poker, and then that's really all you need to be like popular in poker as a woman. Just need to be a woman. You don't even need to really play poker. It feels like you can just it's 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 interesting. I think if you know a woman who needs some confidence boost in her life, you should bring her around a poker room.
Well, I mean, I actually have a friend. Her name is Susie. She plays 5'10" at Commerce, and she's a pretty good player. I mean, I don't meet many female good no limit cash game players. I don't know why it is. I've talked about this before. It just I don't know. I don't know if it's an aggression level thing or what. But there's only a few that I've ever really seen that are decent female no limit players. Um, but yeah. I mean, obviously there are lots of women that are sponsored that don't have anywhere near the skill level of their male counterparts. But it is what it is. You know, yeah.
So what are your podcasts like now? Because I haven't really listened to anything No Limit related in a long time. Do you still have a lot of guests, John? Like, what's the overall kind of vibe of them now?
No, not really. I don't really have any guests on now, actually. The only guests that I have on are when I do these when I do these podcasts where I'm kind of reviewing almost like a lesson, uh, which I'll do like maybe once every 6 months or something like that, where I'll do kind of a coaching lesson and then bring the guy on and then talk about his hands. Just because it's well, first of all, the podcast is you got to pay for it now, so it's specifically training, and I don't really know if I can. I would have people on, and I have had people on. Like I have people on during the World Series and stuff sometimes, but the people that I would have on would be people that play in games that are applicable to the training. Like to have a guy on,
Like a
like
Krantz, but like the Krantz version of now, whoever that might be.
yeah, I mean to have a guy on like Phil Hellmuth. You know what I mean? I might, if I had the opportunity to interview Phil Hellmuth, obviously I would take him, but I wouldn't put that on as one of my podcasts that cost money. I'd put it up there for free. You know what I mean? It's just
Well, couldn't you still do podcasts for free with guests on there? Just, I mean, see, like you've been around so long, I feel like you've had a chance to interview kind of whoever you want to interview at this point in time. So you might, already kind of run through most of the guests you'd want to do.
Yeah, but I mean, there's almost so much time in a week. I mean, I do a video a week, I do a podcast a week. I don't have I don't have a ton of desire to go out and do a weekly free interview podcast. I mean,
So yeah, I mean, obviously, me and you, we're at like different mindsets right now. You're in like you've been doing it for so long. I'm in like this fresh, like, all right, like what kind of guests should I maybe get on some of these podcasts? Like that's kind of where I'm thinking. Where you're just like, I just want to do what I do and do it well and stick with that.
yeah, I mean, when you do, I mean, sure. I mean, but I mean, an interview show is definitely different than kind of a strategy show. But my podcast is absolutely morphed to, a heavy strategy
Yeah.
and less, kind of less fluff.
So what kind of, what do you think the future has for you, for your website, for your podcast? Like, what do you think, 1 year from now, how would you envision things going?
Well, so the podcast is hosted on crushlivepoker.com. So, I don't know if you know that I do training videos over Live of the Bike video.
I've seen them. I know that's the content you're putting out.
So, that's mainly what, people usually get the kind of dual subscription. And by the way, if anybody's interested in getting a free month, you can actually email me, bart@crushlivepoker.com, and I can give you a code to get you a free month to check out the website. But yeah, so it's videos and it's the podcast. The videos come on Friday, the podcast comes out on Tuesday, and then of course we have Abe doing his weekly podcast, and then Don Ding, who's this guy from 2+2, who did this thread called "I Quit My $100,000 a year job to play poker." He does PLO videos every other week, and yeah, the site just keeps growing. So I'm doing a vendor booth at the World Series this summer, and I have this card player ad that runs this card player article that runs every issue in Card Player, and I'm doing a couple of different ad campaigns in a couple of different magazines. But the booth is really cool because if anyone been to the World Series, like they have these vendor booths in the on the tables on the side in the hallway, and I've got this great location. So I'm going to have this vendor booth there to promote the site, and it's going to be great. I'm going to play some tournaments. I'm going to be managing the booth, and I'm also going to be playing in cash games. And we talked a little bit before the interview, just a quick little thing about being 7-star with Caesar. So I don't know if you ever heard of a site called Wizards of Odds. It explains to you what the odds are in casino games and pit games and stuff like that. So I had never really taken blackjack seriously, and this kind of goes to what Lyman talks about in his podcast, that he thinks that training sites are actually good for poker. If you buy a couple of books, I think one of them is called like KO Blackjack, you can learn how to beat blackjack. I mean, you beat blackjack by basically varying your bets based upon how rich the deck is in tens and aces. You have to practice it, but the information is out there. Now, why does blackjack still exist if you can beat the game? Well, it's because 99.99% of the people don't apply the information, or they just don't care. It's just like poker, right? But the info is out there, which is kind of the same thing with training sites too. The info is there, right? Now you can get pushed back if you do that with blackjack. The casinos are watching you. Like if you vary your bets and you beat them too much, they will bar you. But to make a long story short, I started playing a bunch of blackjack last year where I basically played it at a very, very tiny negative or almost break even, like where I used a very simple count or just very, very good basic strategy at full tables, at high stakes, at the games with the absolute best rules for the player, where the amount of money that I was making in comps coming back was way more than I would lose on average. And I got 7-star rating. And the way that I did that is I probably was betting maybe 500 a hand over the course of 40 hours in 2013, which is a lot of money in. So I got the 7-star card. And one of the things that people don't realize is that, and it's going to be unbelievable for me this year because of my vendor booth, I can cut the list in the cash games. So my game when I play,
Really?
when I play at the World Series, when I play at the World Series, I play 75-150 Omaha. high-low to a 100, 200 kill. Like that's my main game that I usually play every summer, right? It's in the snake pit. It's in the high limit center, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can literally go manage my booth and cherry pick and choose now this summer. Oh, I like this game. Put me up first. Actually, by written in the rules, they're supposed to make the game 10-handed, but they don't usually do that at the World Series. But I go up first on the list, and then I can just leave the game whenever I feel like I want to leave the game, go check out my booth, come back, go first, back up on the list. And it's unbelievable. And I can do that for any game. And this is a game where there's traditionally like long lists.
So this goes along that whole strategy. So you're giving away this strategy right now that if someone else, they can do this now. Shouldn't you probably keep that a secret?
Well, the strategy of becoming 7-star?
The strategy of being able to cut. Some people might be like, whoa, okay, I'm gonna go turn up my degeneracy a bit, and they're gonna go gamble more now in hopes that.
It takes a lot to become 7-star, and you need a huge. I mean, here's the thing, right? So I'll give you a little bit of. We're both poker guys, and probably people that are listening to this podcast can figure this out. I try to explain this to non-gambling people, and they think I'm nuts, but. So I'm going for this bachelor party, right, this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I haven't given them a ton of play, it's going to be a big gambling weekend for me. Like, I'm probably going to try to put in at least 10 hours of 500 a hand at blackjack, okay?
Jeez.
So if you average 80 hands an hour playing blackjack at somewhat of a full table, that's about $40,000 you're gambling per hour, okay?
Mm.
So if I play 10 hours, I'm gambling $400,000. Now, the way that I play blackjack at this certain table, I am probably at a minus 0.2% edge, meaning the house has me by 0.2%. So what's 0.2% of $400,000? $800, okay? So over the course of the weekend, on average, I'm going to lose $800. The amount of money in offers and in comps and free food and beverage for that weekend that I will get for playing 500 a hand for 10 hours will be astronomically more than $800. It's not even close. Now, however, I certainly have a chance of winning or losing $40,000 that weekend. So
I'm not being convinced. I don't ever gamble in the pits. Anytime I talk to anybody that tells me they gamble in the pits, I tell them you should probably stop doing that. So I will live vicariously through your adventures because I don't think I could do that ever again.
Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, gambling in the. What about when someone who doesn't understand poker says you shouldn't gamble?
Yeah, it's essentially sounds like it's a very similar type of thing. Well, would someone tell? I don't think I have conversations with people anymore when they're like, you shouldn't gamble. I just don't talk to them anymore for the most part.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I just broke all the numbers down.
I know. I'm not going to think about it. I don't want to. Now you're going to get me start thinking about playing blackjack. I'm going to go to the casino. I'm going to lose all my money. I'm going to be busto. I'm going to get a steak and play 1-2 and could be bad. I'll have to hear more about this this summer when I'm out in Vegas.
Certainly not rocket science, that's for sure.
I know. There might be someone that listens that makes it 53 minutes into this or however long it ends up being right now, and they're gonna be inspired to go play some blackjack.
I mean, you can also do video poker too, but it's a lot worse for you. I mean, you can play 9-6 jacks or better at a minus 0.5% disadvantage. And
I see why you have the 7-star card rating now.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do it through video poker, but blackjack's a way better deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know going in that I was going to be getting a vendor table either. But it just happens to work out for me. This is, great.
Just one more thing I wanted to ask you. So you've done some announcing on a couple of TV shows before, poker shows. Do you have any future announcing? Like, is that something you enjoyed? Would you like to do more of it?
Sure. I mean, that's where I kind of got my start. Back in the day, live at the bike, I always enjoyed doing.
Do you hope to do some sort of? I mean, there's not much really mainstream opportunity out there for poker anymore, but in the future there might be. Do you hope that that's something that you can eventually do one day, or do more of rather one day?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I had the opportunity, I've done several TV shows in
Yeah,
the
I've
past.
definitely I've seen you on a I've heard I mean I've heard your voice on a couple of shows over the years.
Obviously my preference would be, to do a show like High Stakes Poker where it would be a cash game because, when you're doing a tournament show, the show that got me into really the most mainstream kind of show where I was on TV for was this show called ClubWPT.com, which was on FSN a few years ago, which was literally a 20 big blind sit and go. Like people started with 20 big blinds, and it was like, okay, you know what I mean? It's just like, um, but so I mean, I would obviously prefer to do, a cash game. You keep your fingers crossed. Who knows? I don't know if TV poker is gonna really come back in
Yep.
any type of facet that it used to be when you're looking at online poker coming back state by state. I mean, you have the World Series now, and that's pretty much it in terms of stuff that's out there. It's
There's the
just
WPT, which has it, the
oh yeah, the WPT.
EPTs, the World Series, and there really aren't many cash games that are in the U.S. anymore. They're mostly all in Europe somewhere for the most part.
Yeah, and I just don't, it's just too bad with what happened. I kind of got in like I got in right at the tail end because they had been pumping out these kind of tournament shows, which were basically like glorified infomercials on Fox Sportsnet and Comcast Sportsnet and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I worked with Barry Tompkins, and there was this guy that used to work for those shows called Michael Koenig that used to write poker books, and they kind of let him go, or he just didn't do it anymore. And then I came in, and I would have been that guy that would have been doing like all of those kind of dumb shows. You know what I mean? Like Poker Dome and all that stuff. And it would have been great, except everything ended, you know? Which kind of, and my buddy Dave, who does the WSOP commentary, like he was gonna do that. Do you remember that thing called the Onyx Cup
Oh
that
yeah,
Full Tilt was gonna do?
I remember
He
that.
he was gonna do that. I think he had signed to do that with Poet Pro. He was gonna do the commentary for that, which was that massive tournament.
That thing was sound. It sounded cool in theory, but
Yeah,
it
and then that.
do the poker announcing, are those something that you could make a living off of just doing something like that?
Well, I mean, it's good. Whenever you're on TV, like especially in some sort of network or even in cable, it's good money. It's just a question of how often, you know, how often does it, how often can you do it? Like Norm Norm and Chad and like Lon and Karen. I mean, yeah, they probably can live off of that gig, that one gig that they're doing. It's like a month's worth of work.
But they have so much free time, they're going to do other work anyway.
Yeah, they're gonna do other stuff anyways.
Yeah, but
But yeah, I mean, like a consistent thing. I'm sure Ali Najad was getting paid, at least whatever AFTRA, lead day rate for when he was doing NBC After Dark, if not more. That was he was doing that 6 times a week, so that adds up to a lot of money
yeah,
too.
he was probably making the most in terms of. Were you friends with him? Do you talk to him? What's he doing now?
He does. I mean, I'm not friends with him, but I kind of know him. He does a show for ESPNU called Road Trip, I think.
Hmm.
Of course, this is off season now. You know ESPNU,
Yeah, I've seen it
yeah,
occasionally for some college stuff.
and he does this show called Road Trip where they basically like travel. It's kind of like a lifestyle, kind of fun show where they travel around
Sounds kind of
and
cool.
they kind of travel around and travel to like the campus of where the big game is going to be that week and just kind of like interview like what's the social life like on campus, kind of like a fun show.
Do you think you could ever do something like that? Maybe like something similar to kind of what you do in poker, but maybe another area
Well,
of things.
I would love to do sports broadcasting. I mean, I'm really, really into sports, kind of the rules and the game and the gameplay of sports. I don't closely follow the I don't closely follow what is actually going on in sports, except in the NFL these days. I mean, I could. It just doesn't interest me that much, but I know a ton about um, every sport and the way that it goes and what exactly is going on. Like if you were to watch a game in terms of gameplay to be able to call the action. So yes, in terms of doing like a lifestyle fluffy stuff, probably not so much. You know what
What's
I mean?
yeah, so what would be the process? Have you tried to get into any sort of sports broadcasting? Like, what would be the process if you wanted to maybe start trying to pursue that?
Well, it's tough. When I was doing stuff for FSN, I tried to get in a little bit with their sports department, trying to start off doing
Yeah, just like
some,
network, build some type of
yeah, trying to do
relationships.
some like college baseball and stuff like that, but it never really got off the ground.
Hmm.
So, um, it's all about like kind of working your way up from the bottom and having kind of having contacts and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So, that time may have passed for me, which is fine. I'm on to other things.
All right, Bart. Well, thank you for joining me.
You got it, man. Take it easy. Good luck with everything.
Thank you. I'll probably see you out in the World Series this summer. So good luck
All
with your
right.
vendor booth and the website.
All right.
All right.
Take it easy.
See you.
All right. Bye-bye.